The next morning, which was the Thursday, Dal and his father packed up things around the farm, and I did some cooking in readiness. And round about lunchtime, Dal was coming home, and the letterbox was down near the roadway, and it was about 100 yards from the house. And there was a big explosion, and the embankment had broken on our side of the Pitnacree Bridge. And the water raced in, and Dal ran along the track to the house. And by that time, we had a foot of water in the house. Well, that really meant that we had about a 3-foot sudden rise. The next thing that happened was it was getting close to night, and we put our mattresses up on the kitchen table, and we perched up there, and Tom was in his cot alongside of us on another table. He had a wonderful time. He kept laughing and gurgling because the water was bubbling up through the floor, and he could see it by the kerosene light. Well, early next morning on the Friday, Dal's father, Ted Osbourn, and the neighbour, Mr Patterson, came along in the boat, and they nosed it in through our kitchen door, and we waded. It must have been a bit over knee deep then, and we waded out to the boat and hopped in. Then we went up to Pa and Nana's house, just along the road from us. They'd never had water in the house, and before long it was in there too. So into the boat again and up to the Pattersons' place. And Mrs Patterson and Miss Wiltshire were in the house, and they suggested that I have a rest, which was very nice of them. They put me up on a bed, and they made a little bed on the floor for our son, Tom. And before long, I could hear the water gurgling under the house. So out of bed I got. But before midnight, the whole lot of us were on a haystack. And that was rather scary. We made 3 trips in the boat from the house to the hay shed, which was alongside. The current was so strong, it nearly took us to Morpeth. And when those 3 trips took us 3 hours, we were up on this haystack with the mice and the spiders, and I was absolutely terrified that we might have some snakes up there with us, but we didn't see one, thank God. We spent a very restless night up on the haystack, and the next morning there was a window high up in the back of the shed, and Dal pushed the window open and he looked over to Bulwarra, and he couldn't believe it. There were heaps of his neighbours' houses gone. They just weren't there anymore. Well, in the morning, they decided they should get out and try and get some of the mud out of the Pattersons' house. And Mrs Patterson, Miss Wiltshire and Tom and I were left sitting up on top of the haystack while they went in to clean up. And they managed to get a lot out, but just soon after they got it out, there was a second rise and it came back in again. But Mrs Patterson and Miss Wiltshire and Tom and I had to get off the haystack and sit in the boat because the steam coming out of the hay nearly drove us mad. We finally got back into the Pattersons' place, and by this time nobody had any electricity, water or telephone. We only had Dal's little portable radio, and the batteries of that were very low. So we only switched that on every hour to get messages that came across. And one of the messages said if anybody needed any help to put a cross on the roof of a shed with sheets or something or other, and the helicopter would drop us food and supplies. So they got in the boat and they managed to put it up on Pa and Nana's garage roof. And the helicopter did drop us some supplies, and somehow or other he got to know we had a 10-month-old baby, and we in amongst the food and things, we got 10 tins of lactogen, which were a great help later on, because when we went back, our poor little pussycats were very hungry, and we managed to give them some lactogen as well as the baby. I managed to write a note, and the helicopter, they told us that if we wanted any messages taken back, they would take them. And they posted this letter to my grandparents for me, and I still have it today.